My hospital badge wouldn't scan. 2 swipes before the sensor finally beeped green. My hands trembling with the fatigue I could feel radiating from my very core. The ER had been chaos all week, trauma after trauma rolling through those doors, which meant the nurses stayed until every patient was stable whether their shift had ended or not. I needed the hours. Needed the distraction, actually. With bills piling up on the kitchen counter and my phone lighting up with messages that made my chest tighten, I pulled my jacket from my locker, catching my reflection in the small mirror on the inside of the door. Tired eyes stared back at me. When had the light gone out of them? I closed the locker before I could answer that question. My natural curls were pulled back in what had started as a neat bun 14 hours ago, now half collapsed and frizzing at my temples. The fitted white top I'd changed into after my shift clung to shoulders that had grown more angular over the past month. I'd stopped cooking 2 weeks ago. Easier to grab whatever Steven brought from the cafeteria when he worked nights. Cheaper to say I wasn't hungry when the alternative was going back to that apartment. Home. The word caught in my throat like broken glass. That 1-bedroom in Brooklyn wasn't home anymore. It was a trap. And Marcus held the trigger. I shouldered my bag and headed for the staff exit, waving to Steven at the nurses' station. He'd been my friend since nursing school. Knew me better than anyone here. Always checked in, always noticed. Tonight he looked at me with that particular expression. Half concern, half helplessness. I pretended I didn't see it. "Joy, you sure you don't want me to give you a ride?" His voice was gentle, careful. "I'm good. Need the walk." The lie tasted familiar. I'd been perfecting it for 3 months. Outside, the November night bit through my denim jacket. I should have grabbed my heavier coat this morning, but Marcus had thrown it across the room during last night's explosion, and I'd left before dawn while he was still passed out on the couch. Better to freeze than risk waking him. The walk to the subway normally took 12 minutes. Tonight it stretched endlessly. Each step required intention, my legs uncooperative and heavy. When had I last slept through a full night? Last week, maybe. Before the argument about my disrespectful tone. Before I'd learned to measure every word, calculate every breath. My elbow throbbed where I'd hit the bathroom counter. The bruise there was fresh, maybe 6 hours old, still that angry red-purple that would darken by morning. I pulled my sleeve down and kept walking. The streetlights blurred as exhaustion pulled at the edges of my vision. I blinked hard, trying to clear my head. The city sounds felt muffled. Car horns, distant sirens, the rhythm of 1,000 lives moving around me while mine had gone completely still. Focus, Joy. Just get to the train. Get home. Lock the bedroom door. Make it through another night. I turned the corner onto the main avenue, where the lights were brighter, the crowd thicker. Bodies moving past each other in that distinctly urban choreography. Don't make eye contact. Don't slow down. Don't take up too much space. I'd learned to make myself small, invisible in the way that women like me had to perfect. The dizziness hit without warning. One moment I was walking, the next the sidewalk tilted violently beneath my feet. I reached for the nearby lamppost, but my depth perception had scattered. My hand closed on empty air. The world grayed at the edges, sounds fading to a distant hum. Not here. Not now. Not in the middle of the street where everyone can see. My knees gave out. I fell forward, bracing for the impact of concrete. But I didn't hit the ground. Strong arms caught me, one behind my back, one beneath my knees, pulling me against a chest that felt solid as stone. My head tilted back against fabric that smelled expensive, something dark and woody with notes of bergamot. Completely unfamiliar. Completely safe. "I've got you." The voice was deep, controlled, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent threading through the vowels. It wrapped around me like a command, like gravity itself had shifted to obey him. I tried to speak, to apologize, to explain that I was fine and didn't need this kind of attention. But my throat had closed up. My body had simply stopped taking orders, exhausted beyond function, beyond the ability to maintain the performance. Through half-closed eyes I saw him. Dark hair swept back with precision. a jawline that could have been carved from marble, eyes so intensely brown they were nearly black, focused on my face with a concentration that should have terrified me but somehow didn't. He was tall. Even cradled in his arms I could tell he stood well over 6 feet. Broad-shouldered in a tailored black suit jacket over a crisp white shirt, the top button undone. The fabric was too fine, the fit too perfect for this neighborhood. Mississippi. Can you hear me? His hand moved to my neck, fingers gentle but certain as they found my pulse. Professional. Practiced. Like he'd done this before. I managed the smallest nod. That's when his gaze dropped. My jacket sleeve had ridden up when he caught me, exposing my forearm. Exposing the bruises. The ones on my elbow were visible too, fresh, reddish, unmistakable in their shape and pattern. His entire body went rigid. Those dark eyes fixed on the marks, tracing each one with a focus that made the air between us go cold. I didn't see confusion. I didn't see curiosity. I saw recognition. Like he'd seen this before. Like he knew exactly what those bruises meant, how they'd gotten there, what kind of man left them. Who did this to you? His voice had changed. Still quiet, still calm. But there was something lethal underneath now. Something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Not from fear of him, but from the sudden visceral understanding that this man was dangerous in ways I couldn't begin to comprehend. I pulled weakly at my sleeve, trying to cover the evidence. I'm fine. Just clumsy. I fell at work. Hit the corner of a desk. You fell. He didn't phrase it as a question. The way he said it made it clear he knew I was lying, and that my lie had just made something inside him go very, very still. When's the last time you ate something? The question caught me completely off guard. Today. Earlier I had. Try again. He adjusted his hold on me, one arm tightening slightly to keep me stable. Behind him, I noticed another man in a dark suit, watching us with the alert stillness of a guard dog. And this time, don't lie to me. Tears burned behind my eyes. I didn't cry anymore. I'd trained myself out of it months ago, learned that tears only made Marcus meaner, only proved I was too emotional to understand what I'd done wrong. But something about this stranger's directness, the complete absence of pity in his tone, just expectation that I tell him the truth, cracked something fundamental inside me. Yesterday morning, I whispered. Maybe. He muttered something sharp and low in Italian. Then he spoke over my shoulder to the man behind him, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Dante, bring the car around. Now. Wait. You're not going anywhere alone tonight. His eyes locked on mine, and I saw something there that made my breath catch. Not just anger. Something colder. Something that looked like a promise. Not until I know you're safe. I woke to silence so complete it felt wrong. No traffic sounds. No sirens. No neighbors shouting through paper-thin walls or Marcus's heavy breathing from the couch. Just quiet, and the kind of softness beneath me that I hadn't felt in years. My eyes opened slowly, adjusting to filtered daylight coming through floor-to-ceiling windows draped in charcoal silk. This wasn't my apartment. Panic hit immediately. I sat up too fast and the room tilted. My hands pressed into sheets with a thread count I couldn't begin to guess, cool and smooth against my palms. The bed itself was enormous, dressed in layers of white and gray that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Everything in this room looked like it belonged in a magazine. The furniture was dark wood and clean lines. A leather chair sat in the corner. Abstract art hung on walls painted the color of smoke. Intimidating elegance. That's what this was. The kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because it simply existed, absolute and unquestionable. Where the hell was I? I looked down at myself. Someone had changed my clothes. I was wearing a white cotton t-shirt, soft and oversized, and my jeans were gone, replaced by black sleep shorts I'd never seen before. My heart hammered against my ribs. I checked my arms, my legs, no new marks, nothing that suggested. The door opened. He walked in like he owned not just the room but the air inside it, and I supposed he did. The man from the street. The one who'd caught me. In daylight, he was even more striking. The tailored suit was gone, replaced by a crisp white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and ink. That dark tattoo I'd glimpsed on his neck extended further than I'd realized, intricate patterns disappearing beneath his collar. I shrank back against the headboard instinctively. He stopped several feet from the bed, hands visible, posture open but somehow still radiating control. Those dark eyes assessed me with the same intensity as last night, cataloging every detail. "You're safe here." His voice was quiet, that Italian accent more pronounced in the stillness. "No one will hurt you." "Where am I?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "Who are you?" "My name is Bruce Bianchi." He said it like I should recognize it, and maybe I should have. "You're in my home. You collapsed last night. I brought you here because you needed medical attention, and I wasn't going to leave you on that street." Medical attention. I touched my arm where the 4 bruise would be, found the small bandage. Someone had treated me, fed me fluids while I slept. "You had no right. You were dying." He said it flatly, no emotion, just fact. "Another week and your body would have shut down completely. Dehydration, malnutrition, exhaustion." His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the stubble. So yes, I had every right. The authority in his voice should have made me afraid. This man was clearly dangerous, clearly powerful in ways that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with control. Men like him didn't just help random women off the street. They wanted something. They always wanted something. But when his gaze met mine again, I saw it. The unexpected care. The way his eyes softened just slightly at the corners. The way his shoulders dropped half an inch when he saw I was awake and alert. He'd been worried. Genuinely worried. Not about what I could give him or what he could take, but about whether I'd survive the night. "The man who hurt you," Bruce said, his voice dropping to something lethal and calm. "He's never going to touch you again. That's a promise." I stared at him, trying to process what he just said. The certainty in his voice, the absolute finality of it, like he was discussing the weather, not making threats that could land a person in prison. "You don't understand," I said carefully. "Marcus, it's complicated." "Complicated." Bruce repeated the word like it tasted wrong. He moved closer, not threatening but deliberate, and pulled the leather chair from the corner to sit a few feet from the bed. Close enough to see me clearly. Far enough that I didn't feel trapped. "Tell me what's complicated about a man who leaves bruises on a woman who can barely stand up from exhaustion." Heat crept up my neck. Shame. The familiar companion I'd carried for months. "It's not always like that. Sometimes he's what?" Bruce leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "Sometimes he's sorry. Sometimes he brings you flowers. Sometimes he cries and tells you he'll change." His eyes never left mine. "I've heard every version of that story, Joy. They all end the same way." The use of my name startled me. "How do you? Your hospital badge was in your jacket pocket." He said it matter-of-factly. "Joy Rule. 25 years old. Registered nurse at Brooklyn Methodist. You've worked there for 2 years. Exemplary record. 3 commendations for patient care." He paused. "You called in sick 4 times in the last 2 months. Before that, you hadn't missed a single day." My stomach dropped. "You looked into me? I protect what's mine." The statement hung in the air between us, bold and possessive in a way that should have set off every alarm in my head. "And right now, whether you accept it or not, you're under my protection." "I'm not yours." The words came out weaker than I intended. His expression didn't change. "Then tell me who you belong to. Tell me the name of the man who did this." He gestured to my arms, where the bruises had darkened overnight into deep purples and sickly yellows. "Tell me where he lives. Where he works. Everything." I pulled the sheets higher, wrapping myself in their false security. "Why? So you can beat him up? That'll just make everything worse." "He'll come after me harder." You don't know what he's capable of. Something dangerous flickered across Bruce's face. Not anger exactly. Something colder. More controlled. You're right, he said softly. I don't know what he's capable of. He stood, walking to the window, his back to me. But he has no idea what I'm capable of. And that's the difference. The way he said it made my skin prickle. This wasn't bravado. This wasn't some misguided hero complex. Bruce Bianchi spoke like a man who understood violence intimately, who'd wielded it with precision and purpose. Who are you really? I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want the answer. He turned back to face me, and in the morning light filtering through the windows, I could see the full extent of the tattoo on his neck. Intricate lines and symbols that meant something, marked something. A language of ink that spoke of allegiances and blood. I'm someone who keeps his promises, he said. And I'm someone who doesn't tolerate men who put their hands on women. He crossed back to the chair, sat down again, and this time his voice dropped to something that made the temperature in the room plummet. So I'm going to ask you one more time, Joy. And I need you to understand something. I'm going to find him regardless of whether you tell me. But if you tell me, I can make sure this ends quickly. Cleanly. Without any blowback on you. My hands trembled. What are you going to do to him? Whatever is necessary. His eyes held mine with an intensity that felt like gravity. He put his hands on you. He starved you. He made you afraid to go home. Each statement was measured, deliberate. Men like that don't deserve second chances. They don't deserve mercy. You can't just, my voice cracked. You can't kill someone because they. I didn't say I was going to kill him. Bruce's expression remained perfectly neutral. But I am going to make absolutely certain that he never comes near you again. That he never raises his hand to another woman. That when he thinks about what he did to you, he feels a fraction of the fear you've been living with. Tears burned hot trails down my cheeks before I could stop them. You don't understand. If he finds out I'm here, if he thinks I ran to someone else, he won't find out you're here. Bruce reached forward slowly, giving me time to pull away, and caught one of my tears on his thumb. The gesture was unexpectedly gentle. Because no one knows about this estate except the people I trust with my life. And Marcus, he said the name like a curse, is going to be too busy dealing with his own problems to worry about where you went. His name is Marcus Sterling, I heard myself say, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. He lives at 2247, Atlantic Avenue, apartment 3B. He works construction for Sterling & Sons. His father owns the company. I was shaking now, full-body tremors that I couldn't control. He drinks. Gets mean. It started small, just words, then pushing, then. Enough. Bruce's voice cut through my spiral, firm but not harsh. I have what I need. He stood, and there was something in the way he moved, purposeful, decisive, that told me he was already planning. Already calculating. Already 10 steps ahead. What are you going to do? I whispered. Bruce looked down at me, and his expression shifted. The deadly calm was still there, but underneath it, I saw that unexpected care again. The protective fury of a man who'd appointed himself my guardian whether I'd asked for it or not. I'm going to keep my promise, he said simply. Marcus Sterling will never breathe the same air as you again. That's not a threat, Joy. It's a guarantee. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. There's food being brought up. Eat something. Rest. You're safe here. Then, almost as an afterthought, and Joy? Stop being afraid. That part of your life is over. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me alone with the terrifying certainty that Bruce Bianchi meant every word he'd said. The estate was nothing like the room where I'd woken up. That had been intimidating elegance. This was something else entirely. A sprawling compound of stone and iron that looked like it had been designed to withstand a siege. The car ride had taken 40 minutes, winding through increasingly rural roads until we'd passed through gates that opened without Bruce having to say a word. Security cameras tracked our progress. Men in dark suits stood at intervals along the drive, their watchful presence a reminder that Bruce Bianchi didn't just have wealth. He had an army. I sat in the back of a black SUV with windows tinted so dark I could barely see out, Bruce beside me on his phone speaking rapid Italian to someone who clearly worked for him. Dante drove, the same man who'd been with Bruce on the street, his eyes constantly scanning the mirrors. "How many people work for you?" I asked when Bruce ended the call. He glanced at me, considering how much to reveal. "Enough. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you need right now." But his expression softened slightly. "You're safe here, Joy. That's what matters." The main house rose before us like something out of a different era. 3 stories of stone and arched windows, with wings extending on either side. Manicured grounds stretched in every direction, gardens and pathways disappearing into carefully maintained woodland. It was beautiful in an austere, fortified kind of way. The kind of place that said wealth, yes, but also power, control, territory. Bruce helped me out of the car with a hand at my elbow, steadying me when my legs proved uncooperative after sitting. I was stronger than yesterday. The 4 fluids and actual food had helped, but I was far from recovered. "This is your home?" I asked, staring up at the facade. "One of them." He guided me toward the entrance, where heavy double doors stood open. "This is the safest one." Inside was more of that intimidating elegance, but on a scale that made the first room look modest. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, art that probably cost more than I'd make in a lifetime. But it wasn't cold. Someone had made choices here: warm woods, rich fabrics, touches of color that kept it from feeling like a museum. A woman in her 50s approached, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, her expression professional but kind. "Mr. Bianchi, your guest's room is prepared." "Thank you, Rosa." Bruce nodded to her, then turned to me. "Rosa manages the house. Anything you need, you ask her." Rosa's eyes swept over me with the practiced assessment of someone who'd seen trouble before. "Welcome, Miss Rule. I've had some clothes brought in for you. I hope the sizes are correct." "You didn't have to." "They did." Bruce cut me off gently. "You arrived with nothing. That's been remedied." Before I could process that, footsteps echoed from the hallway to our left, and a familiar voice called out, "Joy? Joy." I turned, and my knees nearly gave out for an entirely different reason. Stephen Turner appeared in the doorway, still in his scrubs, his face a mixture of relief and concern. My Stephen. My friend from nursing school, from late-night study sessions and brutal double shifts. The one person at the hospital who'd actually noticed I was falling apart. "Stephen." I breathed, unable to believe what I was seeing. "What are you? How are you here?" He crossed to me in 3 strides and pulled me into a careful hug, mindful of my bruises. "Are you okay? When you didn't show up for your shift this morning and didn't answer your phone, I thought..." His voice cracked. "I thought Marcus had." "How do you know about Marcus?" I pulled back, looking between him and Bruce. Stephen's expression darkened. "I've known for weeks, Joy. I've been trying to get you to talk to me, to let me help, but you kept insisting everything was fine." Bruce spoke from behind me, his voice carrying that absolute authority. "Mr. Turner was contacted this morning and offered a consulting position. He's here to monitor your recovery." I spun to face Bruce. "You brought him here? From Brooklyn? How did you even..." The implications hit me like cold water. "You found him. Looked into my life. Found out who my friends were." My voice rose. "In less than 12 hours. "Yes." Bruce didn't apologize, didn't justify. Just stated it as fact. "That's insane. That's not normal." "No," he agreed quietly. "It's not. But you needed someone you trust, and I made sure you had that." He glanced at Stephen. "Mr. Turner has been fully briefed on the situation and has agreed to stay on the estate for the next week to ensure you're receiving proper care." Stephen nodded, his hand on my shoulder. "I took a leave of absence, Joy. I'm not leaving you to deal with this alone." The weight of it crashed over me, the sheer scope of what Bruce had done. Found Stephen. Convinced him to come. Arranged a leave of absence from the hospital. All while I'd been sleeping off the worst of my exhaustion. The reach that required, the resources, the absolute confidence that people would do what he asked, it was staggering. I don't understand why you're doing this, I said, looking at Bruce. You don't know me. We met on a street corner. Why go to all this trouble? Bruce stepped closer, his dark eyes holding mine with that same intensity that had caught me the first time. Because men like Marcus Sterling thrive when women like you have nowhere to go. No resources. No protection. His voice dropped. I'm evening the scales. By kidnapping my best friend? Stephen laughed, breaking the tension. I came willingly, Joy. Enthusiastically, actually. When Mr. Bianchi's people explained what happened, he shook his head. I should have done more. Should have pushed harder when I saw the signs. This isn't your fault, I said automatically. No, Bruce interjected, his voice going cold. It's Marcus's fault. And he's going to pay for it. He turned to Stephen. Take her upstairs. Make sure she eats something. I have business to attend to. He was gone before I could respond, leaving me standing in that grand foyer with Stephen, trying to process the fact that my entire life had been picked up and relocated to a fortified estate by a man who wielded power like a weapon. Stephen guided me toward the stairs, his arm around my shoulders. He's terrifying, isn't he? Completely. He also might have saved your life. Stephen's voice was quiet. You were dying, Joy. Another week and I don't think. He swallowed hard. I'm glad he found you. I looked around at the house, at the security, at the vast reach of Bruce Bianchi's influence. Stephen was right. This was safety. This was protection I could never have afforded, never have accessed on my own. But it came with a price I was only beginning to understand. Bruce Bianchi didn't do things halfway. And now that he'd decided I was under his protection, I had the distinct feeling that my life would never be simple again. I saw the first sight of Bruce that evening at dinner. Stephen had spent the afternoon monitoring my vitals, lecturing me about nutrition and rest with the same gentle authority he used on difficult patients. He'd left me in my room, a suite twice the size of my entire apartment, with a bathroom that had heated floors and a shower with 6 different settings, to rest. I tried. I'd lain in that enormous bed staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 36 hours. When Rosa knocked to tell me dinner was ready, I almost said I wasn't hungry, but the look on her face suggested that refusing wasn't really an option in Bruce's house. The dining room was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate. A table that could seat 12 but was set for 2 at one end. Candles flickered in silver holders. The lighting was warm, deliberately subdued. Through the windows I could see the grounds lit by soft landscape lighting, gardens glowing in the dusk. Bruce stood when I entered, a gesture so old-fashioned it caught me off guard. He'd changed from the dress shirt into a black sweater that somehow made him look less dangerous and more human. The tattoo on his neck was still visible, still a reminder of what he was, but in this light, in this room, he could have been anyone. "How are you feeling?" he asked, pulling out my chair. "Better." I sat, hyper-aware of his proximity as he pushed the chair in. "Stephen says my vitals are improving." "Good." He took his seat across from me, and Rosa appeared with the first course, some kind of soup that smelled like heaven. "You need to regain your strength." We ate in silence for a few minutes. The soup was incredible, rich and perfectly seasoned. I realized I was actually hungry, not just eating because I should. My body was starting to remember what it felt like to be nourished. "You're staring," Bruce said without looking up from his bowl. "I'm trying to figure you out." "And what have you concluded?" Now he did look at me, those dark eyes amused. "That you're either very good or very dangerous. Possibly both." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Definitely both." The honesty startled me into silence. Rosa brought the main course, perfectly cooked salmon with roasted vegetables, and disappeared again. Bruce served me first, his movements precise and careful, making sure I had the best portions. "Why do you do that?" I asked. "Do what?" "Take care of me like this. Like I struggled for the word. "Like I matter to you." Bruce set down his fork, giving me his full attention. "You do matter to me. But you don't know me." "I know enough." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with that intensity that made me feel seen in a way that was both uncomfortable and thrilling. "I know you're a nurse who puts everyone else first. I know you worked yourself to exhaustion because you were afraid to go home. I know you've been surviving on nothing but sheer will for months." His voice softened. "I know you deserve better than what you've been given." The tenderness in his words made my chest ache. This was the man who'd caught me on the street, who'd touched my face with gentle fingers, who'd promised I was safe. This Bruce was careful with me, protective in a way that felt genuine rather than possessive. The moment shattered when his phone buzzed on the table. Bruce glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor changed. The softness vanished, replaced by something cold and focused. He stood, already reading whatever message had come through, his jaw tightening. "I need to take this," he said, his voice clipped. "Finish your dinner." He walked to the corner of the room, phone to his ear, and I watched the transformation complete itself. His posture straightened, authority radiating from every line of his body. When he spoke, it was in Italian, rapid-fire and commanding. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. This wasn't a request. This was an order. The man on the phone was arguing. I could hear the faint voice through the speaker, defensive and uncertain. Bruce's response was quiet, deadly, a handful of words that made whoever was on the other end go silent. He ended the call and made another immediately, pacing now. "Dante, the shipment from Genoa, who authorized the route change?" A pause. "I don't care what he thought he was doing. I want him in my office tomorrow morning." Another pause. "No, not tomorrow afternoon. Morning. 6 a.m. He listened for a moment. "Good." 3 more calls followed, each one showcasing a different aspect of whatever empire Bruce commanded. Logistics, finance, personnel management. He spoke with absolute confidence, his focus laser-sharp, making decisions that clearly involved substantial money and serious consequences. Men jumped to obey. No one questioned him twice. This was the boss, the man who commanded respect through sheer force of will, and the understanding that crossing him had permanent repercussions. I should have been terrified. Instead, I watched him navigate his world with a strange sense of awe. This was power in its purest form. Not just wealth or influence, but the kind of authority that made grown men nervous. Bruce didn't need to raise his voice or make threats. His very presence was the threat. He ended the last call and returned to the table, but he didn't sit. His eyes were distant, calculating, already solving whatever problem had been presented to him. "I'm sorry," he said, focusing on me again. "Business doesn't stop." "What kind of business?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Bruce looked at me for a long moment, deciding how much truth to offer. "Import and export, distribution networks, property management." All technically true, I was sure. All carefully phrased to avoid the real answer. "And the men who work for you, they're very loyal. They're well compensated for their loyalty." He finally sat again, but the tenderness from earlier was gone, replaced by something more guarded. "I take care of the people who work for me, just like I take care of you." There it was. The connection between the two sides of Bruce Bianchi. Whether commanding his empire or protecting me, it all came from the same place. An absolute conviction that what was his to protect would be protected. What was his to command would obey. "You're thinking too hard," Bruce said, picking up his fork again. "I can see it in your face. I'm just trying to reconcile the man who serves me dinner with the man who just terrified 3 people over the phone without raising his voice. They're the same man, Joy." He met my eyes directly. I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not. This is who I am. What I do requires a certain kind of ruthlessness. He paused. But it also means I have the resources to protect you in ways no one else could. To make sure Marcus Sterling never comes near you again. To give you safety, security, a life without fear. At what cost? Bruce's expression darkened. Nothing that you'll have to pay. The implication hung between us. He would pay it. Whatever needed to be done, whatever lines needed to be crossed, he would handle it. All I had to do was accept his protection and not ask too many questions about what that protection required. I looked at this man across from me. This beautiful contradiction of tenderness and violence, care and control. And I realized with startling clarity that I was already beginning to trust him. Not despite what he was, but because of it. Bruce Bianchi was dangerous. But he was dangerous in my defense. And that made all the difference. By the end of the first week, I could walk the estate grounds without Stephen hovering. The exhaustion that had become my constant companion was finally receding. I was eating 3 meals a day. Rosa made sure of it, appearing at precise intervals with food that made my previous diet of vending machine snacks seem criminal. The bruises were fading from purple to yellow-green. The physical evidence of Marcus's violence slowly disappearing from my skin if not from my memory. But it was more than just physical healing. I'd started laughing again. Small things at first, Stephen's terrible jokes over breakfast, Rosa's exasperated commentary about Bruce's impossible standards for his coffee, then bigger moments. Yesterday I'd actually smiled at my reflection in the mirror, surprised by the light returning to my eyes, the fullness coming back to my cheeks. I was remembering what it felt like to be Joy Rule. Not Joy who survived Marcus. Just Joy. The gardens became my sanctuary. Acres of carefully tended pathways winding through roses and lavender, past fountains and stone benches positioned to catch the afternoon sun. I'd found a spot near the back, where a pergola covered in climbing wisteria overlooked a small pond. It was peaceful there. Private. The kind of place where I could think without feeling watched, even though I knew Bruce's security cameras tracked every inch of the property. I was sitting there in the early evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of coral and gold, when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. Bruce appeared around the corner, still in his work clothes, tailored charcoal slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, a weariness around his eyes that hadn't been there this morning. "Rosa said I'd find you here," he said. "Is that okay?" "I'm not. I didn't mean to intrude on your space." "Joy." He said my name like a gentle reprimand. "This is your home now. You're not intruding on anything." He gestured to the bench beside me. "May I?" I nodded, suddenly nervous. We'd shared meals, brief conversations in passing, but we hadn't really talked since that first confrontation in the bedroom. Bruce had been busy with whatever his business required, and I'd been focused on healing. We'd existed in the same space but on parallel tracks. He sat with a sigh, leaning back against the pergola post, and for a moment we just watched the sunset together in silence. "You look better," he said finally. "Stephen says you've gained back almost 5 pounds. He would tell you that." I smiled despite myself. "He's very proud of his work." "He should be. You were half dead when I found you." The bluntness should have stung, but it didn't. Bruce didn't sugarcoat things. I'd come to appreciate that about him. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Always." "Why did you stop? That night on the street. Most people would have just, I don't know, called 911 and kept walking." Bruce was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the pond. "I had a sister," he said finally, his voice low. "Gabriella. She was 2 years younger than me. Beautiful. Smart. Had this laugh that could light up a room." The past tense made my chest tighten. What happened? She fell in love with the wrong man. I was overseas handling business for my father. By the time I came back, she'd lost 30 pounds. Stopped seeing her friends. Had bruises she explained away with stories about being clumsy. His jaw clenched. "I didn't see it. Didn't want to see it, maybe. I thought she was just adjusting to married life. Bruce. One night he went too far. Neighbors called the police. She died in the ambulance before I could get to the hospital. His voice was eerily calm, but his hands were fisted on his knees. I killed him 3 days later. Put a bullet in his head and didn't lose a single night's sleep over it. The confession should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of understanding settle over me. This was why Bruce had stopped. Why he'd brought me here. Why he'd made promises about Marcus with such absolute certainty. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't be sorry. Be alive." He finally looked at me, and the pain in his eyes was raw. "When I saw you collapse, when I saw those bruises, it was like watching Gabriella all over again. Except this time I could do something about it. This time I could save her. I'm not her. No. You're Joy. You're your own person with your own strength and your own story." He reached over and took my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "But you deserved saving just as much as she did. And I wasn't going to walk away a second time." The gentleness of his touch contrasted sharply with the violence of his confession. This was Bruce in his entirety, capable of killing without remorse and holding me like I was made of glass. "I should tell you," I said quietly, "about how it started. How I ended up with Marcus." "You don't have to." "I want to." And I realized I did. Bruce had trusted me with his grief. I could trust him with mine. So I told him. About meeting Marcus at a hospital fundraiser 2 years ago. How charming he'd been at first, how attentive. The way it had shifted so gradually I hadn't noticed, the comments about my clothes, my friends, my schedule. How he'd isolated me piece by piece until one day I looked up and realized I was alone. "The first time he hit me was 6 months ago," I said, my voice steady even as tears slid down my cheeks. "I'd worked a double shift and forgotten to call him. He said I was disrespecting him. That I needed to learn my place." I took a shaky breath. I left that night. Stayed with Stephen for a week. But Marcus showed up at the hospital. Made a scene. Promised he'd change, that he'd get help. And my voice broke. I believed him. Bruce's hand tightened on mine, but he didn't interrupt. It got worse after I went back. The hitting became regular. He controlled everything, my money, my phone, where I went. I started calling in sick because I couldn't hide the bruises. Lost weight because I was too anxious to eat. The night you found me, I'd worked a 14-hour shift because it meant 14 hours I didn't have to be in that apartment. I looked at Bruce through my tears. I was dying. Slowly. And I didn't know how to stop it. Bruce pulled me against his chest. His arms wrapping around me with that same tenderness he'd shown from the beginning. I cried into his expensive shirt, letting out months of fear and shame and exhaustion. He didn't try to fix it or minimize it. He just held me, one hand stroking my hair, letting me break apart in the safety of his arms. "You're never going back to that," he said when my tears finally subsided. "Not to Marcus. Not to that fear. Not to that version of your life where you had to shrink yourself to survive." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes fierce. "You're going to rebuild, Joy. You're going to remember who you were before he tried to destroy you. And I'm going to make sure you have the space and safety to do it." "Why?" I whispered. "Why do you care so much?" "Because Gabriella didn't get a second chance. But you do." He wiped away my tears with his thumbs. "And I'll be damned if I let you waste it." The sunset had faded to twilight, the garden lights casting everything in a soft glow. Bruce held my face in his hands like I was precious, like I was worth saving, like I mattered. And for the first time in months I believed it. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 10 days after Bruce had brought me to the estate. I was in the library, a room that had quickly become my second favorite space after the gardens, with floor-to-ceiling shelves and leather chairs positioned near windows that overlooked the grounds. Stephen had left earlier to run errands in the city, and Rosa was busy with the household staff. I'd been reading, finally able to concentrate on something other than survival, when my phone buzzed on the side table. I'd gotten a new phone 3 days ago. Bruce had insisted, saying my old one wasn't secure. This one was sleek and expensive, with a number only a handful of people had. Steven. Rosa. Bruce. The hospital's HR department, because I'd needed to formally request extended leave. The screen showed a blocked number. My first instinct was to ignore it. But something made me answer, some residual programming that said ignoring calls led to consequences. Hello. Silence. Then breathing. Heavy and deliberate. Joy. Marcus's voice slithered through the speaker, and my entire body went cold. Where the fuck have you been? The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. That voice, the same one that had whispered apologies and screamed accusations, that had promised change and delivered violence. I've been calling your old number for over a week, he continued, his tone deceptively calm. That particular calm that came before the storm. You think you can just disappear? Just leave without a word. How did you get this number? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Does it matter? I could hear the smile in his voice. I called the hospital. Talked to that administrator you're always complaining about. Said I was your fiancé worried sick because you've been in an accident. She was very helpful. Gave me your new number, told me you'd taken emergency leave. His tone darkened. Emergency leave, Joy? What emergency? The emergency where you ran away like a coward. I didn't. You didn't what? Didn't think I'd find you. He laughed ugly and sharp. Baby, I will always find you. You're mine. You don't get to just leave. The library door opened and Bruce walked in, already pulling his phone from his pocket to make a call. He stopped the moment he saw my face. Who is this? He asked quietly, crossing the room in 3 strides. I'm talking, Marcus snapped through the speaker, loud enough for Bruce to hear. Who the fuck is that? You got some guy with you, Joy? Is that why you left? You've been whoring yourself out too. Bruce took the phone from my trembling hand, his expression shifting into something that made the air temperature drop 10 degrees. Marcus Sterling, he said, his voice quiet and precise. This is the last time you will contact Joy. The last time you will think about Joy. The last time her name will pass through your mouth. There was a beat of shocked silence. Then Marcus recovered, his voice turning aggressive. Who the hell are you? Where's Joy? Put her back on the... I'm the man who's going to dismantle your entire existence if you ever come near her again. Bruce's tone was conversational, almost pleasant, which somehow made it more terrifying. I know where you live, Marcus. 2247, Atlantic Avenue, apartment 3B. I know where you work, your father's construction company on Flatbush. I know you have a DUI from 3 years ago that your father paid to disappear. I know you owe Jimmy Chun $15,000 in gambling debts. The silence on the other end was absolute. You're wondering how I know all of this, Bruce continued, pacing slowly. You're wondering who I am. Let me clarify. I'm someone with resources you can't comprehend and a very particular interest in making sure Joy never sees you again. He paused, letting that sink in. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to hang up this phone. You're going to forget Joy's number, forget her name, forget she exists. And if you're smart, you'll leave Brooklyn entirely. You can't just. I can. And I will. The quiet fury in Bruce's voice was absolute. Test me on this, Marcus. Please. Give me a reason. The line went dead. Bruce immediately made another call, his free hand coming to rest on my shoulder, grounding me even as his voice turned into rapid-fire Italian. Dante's name. The word now. Coordinates I didn't understand. Within 5 minutes, the library had filled with men. Dante arrived first, his expression grim. 2 others followed, Luca and Marco, men I'd seen around the estate but never spoken to. All of them moved with the same controlled efficiency, the same barely restrained violence. Bruce spoke to them in Italian, showing them something on his phone. Marcus's information, I realized. Every detail of his pathetic life laid out like a target. English, Bruce, I said, my voice shaking. Please. He turned to me, his expression softening fractionally before addressing his men in a language I could understand. Marcus Sterling just made contact. He has Joy's new number, which means someone at the hospital gave it to him. His jaw clenched. Dante, I want to know who. I want to know when. And I want to know how Marcus knew to ask. On it, Dante said, already typing on his phone. Luca Marco, I want eyes on Sterling 24/7. Where he goes, who he sees, what he does. I want a complete picture of his day-to-day. Bruce's voice was ice. And I want to know if he makes any moves toward Brooklyn Methodist or anyone associated with Joy. Consider it done, Luca replied. He threatened her. Bruce's voice dropped even lower, dangerous in its control. He called her property. He tried to intimidate her through me. His eyes flicked to each of his men in turn. I want options prepared, legal and otherwise. The otherwise hung in the air like a promise of violence. Bruce, I said quietly. You can't. You said you'd handle this cleanly. He crossed to where I sat, kneeling down so we were eye level. His hands took mine, and despite the fury radiating from him, his touch remained gentle. And I will. But he just proved he's not going to stop, Joy. He tracked down your new number. He called you. He threatened you. His eyes searched mine. I told you that you'd never have to be afraid again. I meant it. What are you going to do? Whatever is necessary. He stood, addressing his men again. I want a full report by tonight. Everything on Marcus Sterling. His movements, his associates, his vulnerabilities. Everything. The men dispersed with military efficiency, leaving Bruce and me alone in the library. He pulled me to my feet and into his arms, holding me tight against his chest while his heart hammered with barely contained rage. I'm sorry, I whispered. You have nothing to apologize for. His voice was rough. This is what men like Marcus do. They can't accept that they've lost control. They push and push until someone pushes back harder. He pulled away just enough to look at me, his eyes fierce. I'm going to push back, Joy. And when I'm done, Marcus Sterling will wish he'd never heard your name. I should have been afraid of what that meant. Should have been horrified by the casual way Bruce discussed dismantling another man's life. Instead, I felt safe. Protected. Like for the first time someone was actually on my side. He sounded so confident, I said. Like he really believed he could just call and I'd come running back. Men like Marcus are only confident when they're facing someone weaker than them. Bruce's smile was cold. I'm not weaker. And he's about to learn exactly what that means. Bruce left the estate at dawn. I watched from my bedroom window as he emerged from the house in a black suit that looked like it cost more than my yearly salary. His movements precise and purposeful. Dante held the car door open, and 3 other vehicles idled behind them, engines running. Bruce paused before getting in, his gaze lifting to my window. Even from this distance I could see the set of his jaw, the cold focus in his eyes. He was going to war. And Marcus Sterling was the enemy. The day stretched endlessly without him. Stephen tried to distract me with breakfast, conversation, a walk through the gardens. Rosa fussed over me more than usual, bringing tea I didn't ask for and checking on me every hour. They both knew. Whatever Bruce was doing, it was significant enough that the entire household felt his absence. I tried to read, tried to rest, tried to convince myself that I didn't need to know the details of what Bruce was doing in the city. But my mind kept circling back to Marcus. His voice on the phone, his threats, his absolute certainty that he could still control me. By evening I'd worn a path in the carpet of the library, pacing while the sun set and the grounds fell into darkness. The sound of cars returning came just after 9. I stood at the library window watching the convoy pull through the gates. Bruce emerged from the lead vehicle, and even from here I could see he looked different. Not disheveled, Bruce would never be disheveled, but there was a satisfaction in his posture, a completion that hadn't been there this morning. He came directly to the library. "It's done," he said, closing the door behind him. I turned from the window, my heart racing. What's done? What did you do? Bruce crossed to the bar cart and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, downing it in one swallow before pouring another. I dismantled him. Piece by piece. Every aspect of his life that gave him power gone. Bruce. His job first. He turned to face me, leaning against the bar. I paid a visit to his father this morning. Sterling and Sons Construction. Nice office in downtown Brooklyn. Mr. Sterling Sr. was very interested to learn about his son's gambling debts, his substance abuse, and the 3 complaints filed against him by female coworkers that mysteriously disappeared from HR records. My breath caught. How did you? Money and pressure open a lot of doors, Joy. Bruce's smile was sharp. I also introduced Mr. Sterling to some photographs. Marcus with his dealer. Marcus at underground poker games. Marcus doing lines in the company truck. He took a sip of his whiskey. His father fired him on the spot. Told him to clean out his desk and never come back. I sank into the nearest chair, my legs suddenly unsteady. Next was his apartment. Bruce continued, his voice matter of fact. Turns out Marcus hasn't paid rent in 3 months. The building owner was very receptive when I offered to buy the property, at triple the market value. The only condition was immediate eviction of apartment 3B. You bought his building? I bought 3 buildings on that block. Seemed efficient. He shrugged like it was nothing, like dropping millions of dollars was as simple as buying coffee. Marcus has until Friday to remove his belongings. After that, everything gets donated or destroyed. The scope of it was staggering. In less than 12 hours, Bruce had stripped Marcus of his livelihood and his home. There's more, Bruce said, and something in his tone made my stomach tighten. I visited him personally this afternoon. You what? I wanted him to see my face, to understand exactly who was taking his life apart. Bruce set down his glass and crossed to where I sat, kneeling down so we were eye level. I went to that construction site where he was collecting his things. Walked right up to him in front of his former coworkers. Bruce, if he saw you. He needed to see me. His voice was calm, utterly controlled. I introduced myself. Told him I was the man who'd been taking care of you. The man who now controlled his employment, his housing, his reputation. Bruce's eyes held mine. I told him that if he ever came near you again, if he ever called you, if he ever thought about you, what I'd done today would seem merciful in comparison. What did he say? He tried to get aggressive, puffed up his chest, started making threats. Bruce's smile was cold. Then Dante and Luca stepped out of the car behind me, and Marcus suddenly remembered he had somewhere else to be. I could picture it perfectly, Marcus's bravado crumbling the moment he realized he was outmatched, outgunned, facing men who operated on an entirely different level than his petty violence. That wasn't all, Bruce continued. I had Dante visit Jimmy Chun, the loan shark Marcus owes $15,000. We bought the debt. Marcus now owes me, and I've made it very clear that payment is expected in full by the end of the month. He doesn't have $15,000. I know. Bruce's expression was pitiless. Which is why he'll have to leave the city to escape it. Brooklyn's not big enough for him to hide from my people. The pieces clicked into place. Bruce hadn't just dismantled Marcus's life, he'd engineered his exile. Taken away his job, his home, his safety, and left him with a debt he couldn't pay to a man he couldn't escape. And if he doesn't leave? I asked quietly. Bruce's jaw tightened. Then the debt collectors become more insistent. And if that doesn't work? He paused, choosing his words carefully. I have other methods of ensuring compliance. The implication was clear. Bruce had been restrained today. Surgical. But that restraint had limits. I saw his bank accounts, Bruce said, his voice softening slightly. The hospital administrator who gave out your number? Received a $2,000 deposit the day before Marcus called. I had her fired this afternoon. She won't work in healthcare again. Bruce. She sold your privacy and safety for $2,000, Joy. His eyes flashed with anger. She deserved worse than unemployment. I should have felt guilt. Should have worried about the woman's livelihood, about Marcus's future, about the casual way Bruce had destroyed lives today. But all I felt was relief. Bone-deep, overwhelming relief that someone had finally made Marcus face consequences. That someone had finally protected me with the same ferocity Marcus had used to control me. Did you hurt him? I asked. Physically, I mean. No. Bruce's voice was firm. I didn't lay a hand on him. I didn't need to. Violence is easy, Joy. Any fool with a gun can solve problems that way. He stood, pulling me up with him. But true power? True power is making someone's entire world collapse without throwing a single punch. It's showing them how small they really are. How powerless. He pulled me against his chest, and I could feel the controlled energy still radiating from him, the satisfaction of a predator who'd successfully hunted. Marcus Sterling spent months making you feel powerless, Bruce said into my hair. Today, I made sure he understands what real powerlessness feels like. He pulled back to look at me. He's broken, Joy. Unemployed, homeless, in debt to dangerous people with no friends and no prospects. And he knows, absolutely knows that I did this. That I can do worse. That his only option is to disappear. And if he doesn't? Bruce's smile was lethal and calm. Then I stopped being merciful. I looked up at this man who'd spent his day systematically destroying another human being. All for me. Who'd used wealth and influence and calculated cruelty to ensure my safety. Who stood here now holding me like I was precious, while Marcus's life lay in ruins behind him. Thank you, I whispered. Bruce's expression softened, his hand coming up to cup my face. You never have to thank me for protecting you. That's not negotiable. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. Marcus Sterling is finished. And you're free. I woke up gasping from a nightmare, drenched in sweat, Marcus's voice echoing in my ears. But when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in that Brooklyn apartment with thin walls and broken locks. I was in the guest suite at Bruce's estate, safe behind security gates and armed guards. The clock on the nightstand read 3:17 a.m. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting silver shadows across the room. Marcus was gone. Bruce had made sure of it. So why was my heart still racing? I wrapped myself in a robe and padded barefoot down the hallway, needing air, needing space to think. The house was quiet at this hour, just the distant hum of security systems and the occasional creak of old wood settling. I made my way to the kitchen thinking tea might help, might calm the trembling in my hands. Bruce was already there. He sat at the island in dark pajama pants and a t-shirt, a tumbler of whiskey in front of him, his phone face down on the marble countertop. He looked up when I entered, and even in the dim light I could see the concern that immediately crossed his features. Nightmare? He asked. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. He stood and went to the stove, putting a kettle on without being asked. Chamomile or lavender? You keep tea. Rosa keeps tea. I keep whiskey. A small smile played at his lips. But I'm learning. We stood in comfortable silence while the water heated. Bruce moved around the kitchen with surprising familiarity, pulling down a mug, finding the tea Rosa had organized in neat rows. When the kettle whistled, he poured the water over lavender leaves and brought the cup to where I'd perched on one of the island stools. Do you want to talk about it? He asked, settling back into his own seat. I dreamed he found me, that he walked through those gates and all your security couldn't stop him. I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into my palms. That everything you did was for nothing. It wasn't for nothing, Joy. I know that. Logically, I know that. I looked up at him. But my body doesn't believe it yet. My brain keeps expecting him to appear. Keeps waiting for the other shoe to drop. Bruce reached across the island and took one of my hands in his. That's normal. You spent months living in survival mode. Your nervous system doesn't just reset overnight. How long did it take? I asked. After Gabriella. How long until you stopped expecting to save her? His expression darkened, but he didn't pull away. Years. Maybe never completely. He turned my hand over, his thumb tracing the lines of my palm. But eventually you learn to live with it. The guilt. The what-ifs. You learn that you can't change the past, but you can make damn sure the present is different. Is that what I am to you? The question escaped before I could stop it. A chance to rewrite history? Bruce's eyes met mine, dark and intense. At first? Maybe. When I saw you collapse, when I saw those bruises, yes, part of me saw Gabriella. Saw a chance to do what I couldn't do for her. He stood and came around the island, turning my stool so I faced him. But that's not what you are to me now. What am I now? He was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow that I'd never noticed before. Your joy rule. A woman who survived something that should have broken her. A woman who's stronger than she realizes. His hands came to rest on either side of me, caging me in but not trapping me. A woman I'm falling in love with. The confession hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to examine. Bruce. I'm not asking you to say it back. I'm not asking for anything. His voice was low, controlled. I just need you to know that this, he gestured between us. Stop being about redemption or guilt or fixing past mistakes. This is about you. About wanting to give you the life you deserve. I thought about what that life looked like. Safety, yes. Comfort, obviously. But also this man who destroyed empires before breakfast and made me tea at 3 in the morning. This man who'd killed for his sister and showed restraint for me. This man who was dangerous and deadly, and somehow the gentlest person I'd ever known. I don't know how to reconcile it, I admitted. The things you did to Marcus, buying buildings, ruining his career, threatening him, I should be horrified. I should think you're a monster. But you don't. No. I look down at our joined hands. I'm relieved. Grateful. I feel safer than I've felt in years. And that should terrify me, shouldn't it? That I'm okay with what you did. Bruce tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes. What I did was give you your life back. I used the tools I have, money, influence, fear, to ensure a violent man can never hurt you again. If that makes me a monster, then I'm a monster. I can live with that. You're not a monster. I've done monstrous things, Joy. We'll do them again if necessary. His honesty was brutal and refreshing. I run an empire built on things that exist in legal gray areas. I have blood on my hands. I've made choices that would keep most people up at night. But not you. Not me. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I sleep fine because every choice I've made has been calculated. Every action has had purpose. I don't hurt innocent people. I don't prey on the weak. But men like Marcus. His jaw tightened. They get exactly what they deserve. I understood then what I'd been wrestling with for days. Bruce wasn't good or evil. He existed outside those simple categories, in a space where morality was measured by different metrics. He protected what was his. He avenged wrongs against people he loved. He operated by a code that had nothing to do with laws and everything to do with loyalty and justice and power. And I was falling in love with him too. I'm scared, I whispered. Not of you. Never of you. But of this. Of needing you. Of what it means that I feel safe with a man who casually buys buildings to evict my ex-boyfriend. Bruce's laugh was low and genuine. When you put it that way, it does sound excessive. It was excessive. It was insane. I found myself smiling despite everything. It was also exactly what needed to happen. He pulled me off the stool and into his arms, holding me against his chest where I could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. You don't have to reconcile anything tonight. You don't have to have all the answers. His hand stroked through my curls, gentle and soothing. You just have to know that you're safe. That Marcus is gone. That I'm here. I tilted my head back to look at him. What happens now? Now. His expression softened. Now you heal. You rebuild. You remember who you were before Marcus and become whoever you want to be next. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, tender and chaste. And I'll be here, for as long as you'll have me. And if I want you forever? The question surprised us both. But standing there in his kitchen at 3 a.m, wrapped in his arms while he held me like I was precious, forever didn't seem like such an impossible concept. Bruce's smile was slow and devastating. Then forever is what you'll get. I stood on my toes and kissed him, soft and deliberate, pouring everything I couldn't yet say into that contact. He responded immediately, one hand cupping the back of my head, the other wrapping around my waist, pulling me closer but still somehow gentle, still careful with me even as passion sparked between us. When we finally broke apart, breathless, Bruce rested his forehead against mine. "No more nightmares tonight," he murmured. "I've got you." And for the first time since this all began, I believed him completely. The sunrise over Manhattan was breathtaking from the penthouse terrace. I stood at the railing, wrapped in one of Bruce's cashmere throws, watching the city wake up beneath us. Gold and pink light spilled across the skyline, catching the glass towers and painting the Hudson in shades of copper. From up here, the noise and chaos of the streets below faded to nothing. Up here it was just the wind and the light and the endless possibility of morning. 1 year. 365 days since Bruce had caught me falling on that street corner, and decided I was worth saving. I barely recognized the woman I'd been then, hollow-eyed and half-starved, bruised and breaking. That Joy had believed herself small, powerless, deserving of the violence she endured. She'd made herself invisible just to survive. The woman I was now stood tall in designer loungewear, her natural curls swept up in a silk scarf, her skin glowing with health and happiness. This Joy ran a charitable foundation that provided resources to domestic violence survivors. This Joy sat in meetings with city officials and hospital administrators, advocating for better support systems. This Joy had a voice that people listened to. This Joy was Mrs. Bruce Bianchi. The wedding had been 6 months ago, a small ceremony in the estate gardens with only the people who mattered. Stephen had walked me down the aisle, tears streaming down his face. Rosa had arranged flowers that looked like they'd been pulled from a dream. And Bruce had looked at me like I was his entire world, like catching me that night had been the moment his life finally made sense. I touched my stomach, still flat beneath the silk of my robe, but not for much longer. 3 months along. A daughter, the ultrasound had revealed last week. Bruce had held my hand through the entire appointment, his grip almost painful when the technician had pointed out the tiny heartbeat on the screen. "She'll never know fear like you did," he'd said in the car afterward, his voice rough with emotion. "She'll never know what it's like to feel powerless." Because Bruce Bianchi protected what was his with absolute totality. And I was his. Our daughter was his. We were family now, bound by love and loyalty and a shared understanding that some things were worth fighting for. The terrace door slid open behind me. "You should be sleeping," Bruce said, crossing to where I stood. He'd thrown on pajama pants but nothing else, his chest bare despite the October chill. The tattoos I'd once found intimidating were now familiar territory. I could trace every line of ink with my eyes closed, knew the stories behind each symbol. I couldn't sleep. Too much excitement for one day. I leaned back against him as his arms came around me, one hand settling protectively over my stomach. "Did you finish the call with Tokyo?" "An hour ago. The deal's done." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "Which means I'm officially done with international business calls for the next 6 months. I made it clear, when our daughter arrives, I'm unavailable." The certainty in his voice made me smile. Marcus. I rarely thought about him anymore. The nightmares had stopped months ago. Stephen had told me through the hospital grapevine that Marcus had left New York entirely, moved somewhere in the Midwest where Bruce's reach supposedly didn't extend. I knew better. Bruce's reach extended everywhere. Marcus stayed gone because Bruce allowed him to stay gone, and the moment that changed, Marcus would disappear more permanently. But that was Bruce's world. the part of his life that existed in shadows and moral gray areas. He kept it separate from us like a suit he put on for work and took off when he came home. "What are you thinking about?" Bruce asked, his chin resting on top of my head. "How different everything is. How different I am." I turned in his arms to face him. A year ago I was dying. Now I'm planning a nursery and running a foundation and married to a man who terrifies city officials. I prefer to think of it as commanding respect. "You terrify them, Bruce. Own it." His smile was sharp and satisfied. "Fine. I terrify them. But only when necessary." He cupped my face in his hands, those same hands that had caught me when I fell, that had held me through nightmares, that would hold our daughter with the same fierce gentleness. "You know what terrifies me?" "What?" "The thought that I almost didn't stop that night. That I almost kept walking." His eyes held mine, dark and intense. "That you would have gotten on that subway and I never would have known you existed. But you did stop." "I did." He kissed me slow and thorough, the kind of kiss that still made my knees weak. "Best decision I ever made." We stood there as the sun climbed higher, painting the city in shades of gold. This was our kingdom now, not through fear or violence, but through the life we'd built from the wreckage of who we'd been. Bruce's empire provided the foundation, yes. His power kept us safe. But what we'd created together was something neither of us could have built alone. "I love you," I said, the words coming easier now than they had at the beginning. "Even knowing what you are. What you've done. What you're capable of. Especially knowing those things," Bruce corrected gently, "because you understand why I do them. Who I do them for." He was right. I'd reconciled it months ago. The dangerous man and the peace he provided weren't separate things. They were two sides of the same coin. Bruce's capacity for calculated violence was exactly what made him capable of protecting me so completely. His willingness to cross lines was what allowed him to keep our family safe. "Our daughter is lucky," I said, placing my hand over his where it rested on my stomach. "She'll grow up knowing her father would burn the world down for her." "Damn right she will." His voice was fierce with love and promise. "She'll grow up strong and safe and absolutely certain of her worth. She'll never doubt that she deserves respect, protection, everything good this world has to offer." He pulled me closer. "She'll be like her mother that way." The sun had fully risen now. The city spread before us like a gift. Somewhere down there, people were struggling the way I'd struggled. Surviving instead of living. Afraid instead of free. My foundation would help some of them. Bruce's protection would help others. Together we'd make a difference in whatever ways we could. "Come back to bed," Bruce murmured against my hair. "We have a meeting with the architect later. But right now, I just want to hold my wife and our daughter and watch the morning from somewhere warmer." I let him lead me inside, back to the bedroom that overlooked the city we now ruled together. Not through fear, but through the power of what we'd become. A year ago I'd been falling. Today I was flying. And Bruce Bianchi, the dangerous man who'd caught me, was flying right beside me. Forever, just like he'd promised.